The Nintendo 64 was one of the first fully realized 3D gaming consoles. It changed the way everyone played games. And some of those changes, well, some games when introduced to a 3D environment didn't seem to play too well. I mean, they worked and all, but they just didn't feel good. Something about them just felt odd. That's not to say that every game felt odd. There were a lot of games that felt really good to play. One example is Super Mario 64.
Mario.
Somehow they did something very right with their gameplay. When gaming evolved into 3D, Mario evolved right along with it. Playing Mario in 3D after playing him in 2D just felt natural, and there weren't many things that felt clunky or forced. So what did Mario 64 do that was so right? One thing was clear, they changed a whole lot of things. Mario punches and kicks and he has a health meter, and there's no more flagpoles. Why did they change everything so drastically? It was all based on one idea: movement. Moving in the 3D world meant different controls. There's no more D-pad, now it's all about the joystick. Nintendo was really focused on making a Mario game that would take place in a 3D environment. When developing the game, they designed Mario's character model first to see how he would move in 3D. They then designed the game around the fact that he would move in 3 dimensions. Since moving in 3D was the priority, gameplay evolved around the fact that the player would be free roaming. This is huge. This very decision is what makes the game feel natural and the one that we all know and love today. This is exactly why everything in Mario changed.
Here we go.
Let's take a look at Super Mario Bros. In Super Mario Bros., the 2D environment allowed the gameplay to be designed around the routes that the player would take. You could pretty much move anywhere in the frame, but there were two things that limited the way you moved. There was gravity, and there was the necessity of going to the right of the screen. Since you had to go forward, you needed to pass whatever was in front of you. Because of the inclusion of gravity, jumping on the platforms was your means of advancing forward. You have control, but the gameplay relies on your competence with the challenges at hand. Since Super Mario Bros. Was built around platforming, levels were crafted so you had to go into certain places to advance. Challenges were made to complement your constant forward motion. This was easier in 2D because there isn't much room for error. But in Mario 64, designers couldn't use the same types of planned platforming challenges. With free movement in 3 dimensions, no designer could really know where the player might go next. And therefore, challenges couldn't be crafted the same way. Instead of heading in one direction toward the flagpole, Mario 64 had to change the goal entirely to complement a Mario that would be free roaming. And so the goals no longer relied on flagpoles. Instead, they became stars. A pure genius way of making goals. Each star had a mission with a single task, and it was up to the player to find out how to do that task. Instead of planning around what the player would do to get to the end, which was always the same in every level, goals were now indefinite. They became riddles. Players had to find out what to do by reading the little prompt. Gameplay therefore became explorative. Players had all the control and they would find out by themselves how to get to the star. Now players had almost complete control of where they're going, and therefore exploring was encouraged. And as a result, gameplay became less about action platforming and more about puzzle platforming. The player had all the tools necessary, they just had to put them in the right order to find out how to collect the star. Puzzle-like gameplay made action secondary, and enemies played different roles than they did in older Mario games. You'll notice while playing Mario 64 that the enemies were less of a barrier, and kind of more of an annoyance. With this more focus on exploration, the enemies couldn't be positioned in absolute encounters anymore, unless moving forward was constrained somehow. They had to be designed of more of a hindrance that would annoy Mario, and less of a challenging barrier that demanded focus. With enemies no longer being in the focus, Mario's combat had to change as well. Instead of killing enemies by jumping on them, you punch and kick, dive, or ground pound. These attacks were used like a tool. You could use them if you needed, rather than being required to use them to overcome challenges. The jumping attack was still left in the game, probably because it came to be expected. But because of the constant exploring and ever-changing physical direction, most of the attacks were used to attack where Mario was facing. Because enemies stopped being the focal point of platforming, and exploration was embraced, the designers needed to be more lenient on damage. Mario 64 added a health meter to let the player have priorities while they explored. The 2D Mario games were designed around the fact that the player would face certain challenges that were set up for them. A 2-hit system was well understood because going forward into an enemy is pretty tough to miss. You go forward to an enemy and get hit, or you don't. However, now with the free roaming Mario, the designer again was uncertain about the player's real-time location. The player explores and finds out things are bad as they go along. Because the player is now in total control of where they're going, the player needs to feel like getting hurt was their fault. And that's exactly what the health meter allows: experimentation. Mario 64's use of mechanics and gameplay that complemented a 3D environment made a game that felt natural to play in the third dimension. Nintendo designed Mario 64 with 3D space in mind. What was produced was a game that felt natural and complete. Nintendo later applied different design techniques to games like Super Mario 3D World. It's really interesting to see how Nintendo managed to develop a level design and an enemy system that takes gameplay back to its 2D roots in a place that still feels 3D. When a game is designed around a single focus, it makes the whole experience feel cohesive and complete. Mario 64 centered their focus on the very idea of being 3D. Simply making a game on new technology doesn't make it good. You have to be competent and think about why your game exists, and then design around the ideas that you want to convey. Do that, and you'll develop an experience that feels full, and you'll make very happy gamers.